The Manor on the Moors. An original story inspired by Agatha Christie. The year was 1954, and the Yorkshire moors lay under a heavy blanket of fog, the kind that seemed to absorb sound and blur reality. I had not intended to stay the night at Blackthorn Manor. In truth, I had intended to avoid it entirely. Yet, as the twist of fate would have it, a mechanical failure stranded me miles from the nearest village, and the manor appeared before me like a phantom out of an old Gothic novel. I am James W. Harland, a retired journalist from Boston. After decades chasing wars, political scandals, and the intricacies of human deceit, I sought quiet, perhaps a novel to write before my own story ended. But the kind of peace one imagines in the countryside rarely materializes when destiny has other plans. The manor emerged from the mist as I rounded the last bend, tall and brooding, its ivy-clad walls soaked by the drizzle, narrow windows glowing faintly yellow. It was a place that could house secrets or hide them. My coat was soaked, my hands numb from the chill, yet curiosity pushed me forward. I knocked. The door creaked on its hinges and a thin man in a somber black suit appeared. His expression was unreadable, his gaze assessing, almost predatory. "Good evening, sir. May I help you?" he asked, voice low and precise. "James Harland. My car broke down some miles back. Might I use your telephone?" I replied, trying not to sound as desperate as I felt. He hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, Mr. Harland. You are expected." Expected? The word stuck in my throat. "Yes. Lady Blackthorn mentioned you would arrive tonight." I had no memory of any prior invitation, yet the fog and exhaustion dulled my skepticism. I stepped inside. The butler led me into a vast hall lined with portraits, their painted eyes seeming to follow my every movement. Each face bore the severity of long-dead ancestors, and the air smelled faintly of wax and old stone. A fire burned in a grand hearth, its warmth almost oppressive after the damp chill outside. Standing beside it was a woman with silver hair pulled into a tight chignon, her posture straight and commanding. Her eyes, bright and calculating, settled on me immediately. "Mr. Harland," she said smoothly, her voice carrying both authority and an underlying sharpness. "How kind of you to come." I opened my mouth to explain the misunderstanding, but a subtle look stopped me. The weight of her gaze made speech unnecessary. "You must be tired. Dinner will be ready shortly," she continued. "There are others staying tonight, friends of my late husband." I hesitated. A flicker of unease passed through me. There was something unsettlingly deliberate about her phrasing, as if she chose her words to reveal little yet hint at everything. Dinner was announced, and I followed her through a long corridor lined with ancestral paintings and suits of armor. Each step echoed, magnifying the isolation of the manor. The fog pressed against the windows, muffling the world beyond, leaving only the manor and its secrets. The dining room was a cathedral of oak, its walls dark with age, adorned with silver sconces that flickered under the candle's uneven light. 6 places were set, each with polished cutlery, fine china, and crystal glasses that caught the firelight like tiny stars. Beside Lady Blackthorn, the butler Mr. Graves remained silent, his presence like a shadow, ever watchful, unmoving. Lady Blackthorn began the introductions. To her right, Colonel Edwin Sykes, a stocky man with a commanding presence despite his age, adjusted his iron-gray mustache. Next to him, Miss Clara Finch, elegant yet tense, twisted her pearl necklace with habitual nervousness. Opposite her, Dr. Leonard Pike, tall, precise, the type whose quiet scrutiny could unsettle anyone. And finally, Mr. Henry Wainwright, a scholar with a hunched posture, absorbed in his thoughts and barely making eye contact. I attempted to explain my unexpected arrival, emphasizing the accident, but she only smiled faintly. "How curious," she murmured. "You remind me very much of someone I once knew." No one spoke further. The grandfather clock ticked heavily, each swing of the pendulum like a heartbeat in the tense silence. The fog outside pressed against the panes, whispering across the moors, carrying secrets that perhaps should never be heard. Dinner commenced. The conversation was polite, but strained. Colonel Sykes dominated topics with stories of military exploits. Clara Finch interjected hesitantly, hinting at wartime tragedies. Dr. Pike offered precise, almost surgical observations on the manor's architecture. Lady Blackthorn listened, her eyes scanning each guest, cataloging expressions as though measuring their truths. Midway through the meal, a remark shifted the room's energy. "So," Colonel Sykes said, swirling his wine, "we are gathered here again. Just like 20 years ago. Except," his gaze flicked to Lady Blackthorn. "Except the one who isn't." The words landed like a hammer. Clara Finch's fork clattered, Dr. Pike's eyes narrowed, Lady Blackthorn's hand trembled before she regained composure. "I'd prefer we not speak of that night," she said softly. Of course, no one could avoid it. We were all thinking of the event she refused to name. I ventured cautiously. "If you'll forgive a stranger's curiosity, was it someone close to you, Lady Blackthorn?" Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, met mine. "Close enough," she replied, and the weight of that statement lingered longer than any words could. The remainder of dinner passed in a blur of small talk, punctuated by glances that weighed the past against the present. Each guest seemed to wrestle with memories best left undisturbed. And as the meal ended, I realized the manor itself had a presence, a sentient tension, aware of our every movement and thought. After dinner, I wandered the corridors, my mind restless. The fog pressed against the windows, the portraits seemed to whisper, and the wind carried faint echoes of lives once lived within these walls. A distant clock struck 10. I paused outside the library, a heavy door with brass fittings. It seemed to breathe with secrets. A shadow moved behind the curtains. My pulse quickened. This was not merely a manor, it was a theater, each of us actors caught in a play orchestrated by the past, by memories, by sins unspoken. I returned to the drawing room, where Lady Blackthorn sat in her usual chair. Her hands rested on the arms, knuckles tight. "Rest now, Mr. Harland," she said quietly. "Tomorrow, the real story begins." I wondered what she meant, but sleep would not come. The fog lay thick over the moors, and with it, the sense that the night had not yet revealed its darkest secret. Dinner had been served in the vast oak-paneled dining room, where the flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows across the high ceiling and ancestral portraits. The table was set for 6, each place with silver cutlery polished to perfection and crystal glasses that caught the firelight in 100 miniature sparks. The atmosphere was polite, restrained, yet thick with tension, a tension that seemed to seep from the manor itself. Lady Blackthorn, seated at the head of the table, gestured elegantly. "Allow me to introduce our guests," she said, her voice calm but carrying a subtle edge. To her right was Colonel Edwin Sykes, a stout man with iron-gray hair and a commanding presence, his military bearing still intact despite the years. His eyes swept the room as if assessing threats, though it was unclear whether he measured danger in others or simply his own unease. Next to him, Miss Clara Finch sat with her back unnaturally straight, a string of pearls twisted in her delicate hands. Her eyes flickered constantly, betraying a nervous vigilance, hinting at a mind occupied by unspoken memories. She was a nurse during the war, she told me once, though something in her tone suggested she was not eager to discuss it further. Across from her, Dr. Leonard Pike appeared the very picture of composure, tall, thin, with the precise mannerisms of a surgeon or perhaps an undertaker. There was a coldness about him, a measured calculation that made his gaze unnerving, as if he were analyzing everything including me. Finally, Mr. Henry Wainwright occupied the last seat, hunched slightly over his plate. He was a scholar of some kind, one whose thoughts seemed miles away, who spoke in quiet murmurs when he did speak, barely meeting anyone's gaze. As I attempted to explain my unexpected arrival, emphasizing the broken car and the accident, Lady Blackthorn merely smiled faintly. "How curious," she murmured. "You remind me very much of someone I once knew." Her words, though few, carried weight. They seemed to echo through the room, unspoken connections linking us all in the flickering candlelight. No one spoke for a long moment, the grandfather clock in the hall ticking heavily, the sound amplified in the silent room. The fog outside pressed against the windows, muffling the distant world, creating a kind of suspended time. The meal began formally. Colonel Sykes dominated the conversation with tales of his military exploits, stories filled with discipline, courage, and sometimes quiet regret. Clara Finch interjected sparingly, hinting at wartime tragedies she had witnessed, though never dwelling too long on the details. Dr. Pike, ever precise, commented on the architecture of the manor, noting with clinical detachment the age of the oak panels, the condition of the tapestries, and the faint odor of wax and dust. Lady Blackthorn listened silently, a calm observer of the unfolding interplay, her eyes sweeping from one guest to the next, reading gestures and expressions with unerring precision. Each pause, each glance, seemed to carry a significance I could not yet comprehend. Halfway through the main course, a remark changed the mood entirely. Colonel Sykes, swirling his wine glass with deliberate slowness, said, "So we are gathered again. Just like 20 years ago." Except his gaze shifted sharply to Lady Blackthorn. "Except the one who isn't." The words struck like a sudden gust of wind through the room. Clara Finch's fork clattered onto her plate, Dr. Pike's lips pressed into a thin line, Lady Blackthorn's hand trembled ever so slightly before she regained her composure. "I'd prefer we not speak of that night," she said quietly, yet with authority that stilled the room. Of course, that only ensured the event dominated our thoughts. Silence settled heavily, broken only by the faint clinking of cutlery and the occasional crackle from the fireplace. I ventured, cautiously, "If you'll forgive a stranger's curiosity, was it someone close to you, Lady Blackthorn?" Her gaze met mine, sharp, almost piercing. "Close enough," she replied. The weight of those words lingered in the candlelit room longer than any conversation could. Dessert was served, a delicate tart with a hint of lemon and the subtle aroma of almonds. Conversation resumed, though now it was cautious, layered with half-glances and unspoken questions. Colonel Sykes muttered occasionally about old business disputes. Clara Finch's comments were careful, her eyes betraying the tension she sought to mask. Dr. Pike remained clinically observant, measuring reactions with the precision of one who never missed a detail. Wainwright, meanwhile, seemed increasingly uneasy, fidgeting with his spoon, glancing toward Lady Blackthorn with suspicion or perhaps recognition. As dinner concluded, the manor seemed to tighten around us, each shadow lengthening, each creak of the floorboards magnifying the sense of isolation. The fog outside lay thick across the moors, as though the world itself had withdrawn, leaving only the manor and its secrets. I decided to wander the halls, seeking clarity. The portraits, the suits of armor, the heavy draperies all seemed to whisper stories of old grudges, hidden alliances, and sins long forgotten. A faint smell of cigar smoke drifted from the library, unusual in such a house, especially at this hour. It piqued my curiosity. The sound of footsteps above startled me. Someone moved in the upper hall, though all guests should have been seated. The manor's silence pressed against me, making each creak sound louder, more deliberate. Suddenly, a shrill scream echoed through the halls, slicing through the lingering candlelight and fog. We all rushed toward the source, the library. There, sprawled on the carpet beside the desk, lay Mr. Henry Wainwright. His spectacles were broken, and a thin red line marked his throat. His eyes stared wide open at the ceiling, unseeing. Lady Blackthorn stood frozen, her face pale but composed. "Dear God," she whispered. Colonel Sykes muttered an oath. Clara Finch gasped. Turning away, Dr. Pike knelt beside the body, checking for a pulse he knew was absent. The butler, Mr. Graves, looked as though the very air had betrayed him. "Shall I telephone the police, my lady?" he asked. "No," Lady Blackthorn replied calmly, though her eyes scanned each of us, weighing, judging. "Not yet. The roads are impassable in this fog. Until morning, no one leaves this house." A gust of wind rattled the windows. Somewhere, the grandfather clock began to chime midnight. The manor, now silent again, seemed to exhale. I felt a chill. This night was only beginning. Secrets long buried were stirring. And I, an accidental guest, had stepped into a story that was far from over. The manor, cloaked in fog and shadow, had transformed overnight into a labyrinth of suspicion. Following the grim discovery of Mr. Wainwright's body, the atmosphere was taut. Every whisper, every shuffle of feet felt amplified, as though the very walls had become complicit in concealing or revealing secrets. Lady Blackthorn summoned us to the drawing room, a vast space lined with towering bookcases and dark-paneled walls. The fireplace was unlit, and the cold seeped into our bones despite the thick carpets and heavy curtains. She sat in her chair, her posture straight, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of fatigue. She regarded each of us with a silent, calculating gaze, as if weighing the balance of guilt and innocence. "I suppose," I ventured, "we must try to understand what happened." "Yes, Mr. Harland," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "Since you are new here, perhaps your impartial eyes can see what others cannot." Her words, meant as encouragement, turned me into an accidental investigator. The other guests, bound by old histories and latent animosities, looked to me with varied expressions: curiosity, suspicion, and in some cases, veiled contempt. I began with the obvious: motive. Each guest had history with Wainwright. The Colonel's jaw tightened whenever his name was mentioned. Clara Finch's eyes flickered with memory. Dr. Pike remained unreadable, though I sensed a precision in his gaze that suggested hidden calculations. I had disagreements with him, Colonel Sykes admitted when I questioned him privately, his voice a low rumble. Financial and personal. But I would never, not like this. He looked genuinely shocked at the violence that had occurred. Clara Finch was more hesitant. "Wainwright promised me something, once. And he didn't deliver. It humiliated me, made me doubt myself. I resented him, but I would never harm anyone." Her voice trembled, but the steel beneath her words hinted at a mind disciplined by wartime rigor. Dr. Pike's answers were measured, precise, offering nothing. Wainwright was a man of secrets. Many would have reasons to dislike him, I am simply observant. His eyes narrowed slightly, and I sensed layers yet untold. The evening wore on. Conversations in the drawing room were cautious, punctuated by small outbursts and uneasy glances. I noticed subtle clues, a displaced book on the shelf, a faint smear on the carpet, the smell of cigar smoke lingering near the fireplace. Each detail could be significant. I sought to reconstruct the moments leading to the murder. The library had been a room of solitude and scholarship, yet now it bore traces of violence. The thin red line across Wainwright's throat was too precise to be accidental. There were no signs of struggle, only subtle disturbances: a cufflink on the floor, papers shuffled, an ashtray slightly moved. I asked Lady Blackthorn about the letter I had noticed in the library earlier. She did not answer directly, only saying, "The past has a way of speaking to those who listen carefully. Pay attention to whispers and gestures, they often reveal more than words." Her enigmatic reply left me unsettled. I began to observe every glance, every hesitation among the guests. Small gestures, a tremor in the Colonel's hand, Clara's rapid blinking, Dr. Pike's barely perceptible shifting of his weight, all became pieces in a puzzle that refused to yield its picture easily. Hours passed. The fog thickened outside, and the manor felt increasingly like a cage, each guest both prisoner and potential perpetrator. Every floorboard creak, every subtle movement, became a signal. And the knowledge that the murderer was among us made trust impossible. During a brief interlude in the hall, I found myself alone with Wainwright's notes. They hinted at a scandal, financial manipulations, betrayals, and details of relationships with the other guests. Someone had been deeply threatened by this knowledge. The question was, who? A sudden sound, the faintest click behind a tapestry, made me freeze. I approached slowly and discovered a small envelope tucked within the folds. Inside was a letter, written in the same elegant handwriting I had seen before. "The past does not forgive. Tonight, it will claim its due." The message was directed at Lady Blackthorn, yet its implications extended to all of us. The air in the manor grew heavier with unspoken accusations. Later, as midnight approached, I gathered the guests in the drawing room under the pretext of discussion. The fog outside pressed against the windows, and the only light was the flickering fire, casting long shadows across our faces. I spoke cautiously. "The events of tonight suggest that the killer may have been among us, and that motives run deep. Each of you has a connection to Wainwright, yet the method, surgical precision, hints at a knowledge and composure unusual in an ordinary guest." Eyes darted. Tensions rose. Colonel Sykes muttered under his breath. Clara Finch gripped the edge of her chair. Dr. Pike remained composed, his gaze unwavering. Lady Blackthorn's hands were clasped tightly, yet she leaned forward slightly, as though encouraging me to continue. I concluded the night with one thought: the manor, cloaked in fog, shadows, and history, had begun to reveal its first whispers. And in the quiet, I sensed that the story would soon demand confessions, revelations, and the unmasking of a mind capable of violence in the pursuit of hidden truths. The night stretched on, yet sleep eluded us all. Every creak, every whisper of wind, seemed amplified, as if the manor itself were aware, observing, waiting. And I, an accidental visitor, had assumed the role of detective not by choice, but by circumstance. The game had begun. And it was far from over. The fog outside pressed against the windows like a living thing, and the manor, still shrouded in silence, seemed almost to hold its breath. After hours of observing, questioning, and cataloguing every glance, gesture, and whispered word, I felt a mounting certainty the killer was among us, and their motive was buried deep in history, tangled with secrets best left untouched. I decided to confront the guests in the drawing room, one at a time. Lady Blackthorn watched from her chair, her posture regal, her hands clasped as though in silent judgment. The flickering fire cast shadows that danced across the high ceilings, giving the room an almost theatrical air. Colonel Sykes, predictably, admitted he had disliked Wainwright. "Financial disputes," he said, his voice gruff. "Old grudges. But I would never resort to this." He shook his head, seemingly frustrated that suspicion had fallen on him. Clara Finch's confession was tinged with remorse. "He promised me a place in a research project years ago. When it fell through, I was embarrassed, humiliated. I resented him, yes, but to do this never." Her eyes darted nervously, and her voice trembled, yet the honesty in her tone was palpable. Dr. Pike, as always, remained composed, measuring each word, each gesture. "Wainwright had secrets," he said. "Many in this house might have reason to fear him. Observe, I am a man of precision, not passion." His calm demeanor, however, did little to ease the rising tension. "I noted every detail: the displaced papers in the library, the faint scent of cigar smoke, the cuff-link on the floor. Each clue seemed small, yet collectively, they told a story. And then I turned my attention to Lady Blackthorn. She had been a silent observer, but there was a glint in her eye, a subtle tension in her hands that betrayed more than words could. "It was not you, Lady Blackthorn," I said carefully, "but the message in the letter suggests someone intended you to feel the weight of this act." She nodded slowly. "Yes. It was meant to remind me that the past never truly leaves us." I gathered all the guests in the drawing room once more, the fog pressing against the panes like a spectral audience. Then, step by step, I revealed the clues and inconsistencies I had observed over the night. The precise cut across Wainwright's throat, the absence of struggle, the methodical placement of papers, and the faint cigar smell in the library all pointed to someone with surgical skill and meticulous planning. All eyes turned to Dr. Leonard Pike. His composure did not falter, yet his lips pressed into a thin line. "You suspect me," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "The method, the knowledge, the calm observation, only someone with your skills could execute it so cleanly. And yet, the motive lies not in anger or greed alone but in fear. Wainwright discovered something about your past, something that could destroy lives here. And to protect that secret, you acted." The room was silent. Colonel Sykes leaned forward, a mixture of disbelief and vindication on his face. Clara Finch stared wide-eyed. Lady Blackthorn's hands trembled, but she remained silent. Dr. Pike sighed, as if relieved that the truth was finally seen. "Yes," he admitted. "It was necessary. Wainwright knew too much. His intentions were reckless. The lives of those here, our reputations, everything, threatened by his knowledge. I acted to prevent catastrophe." He spoke with a strange serenity, as if confessing a grim duty rather than a crime. The confession hung in the room like a heavy fog, suffocating yet strangely clarifying. Lady Blackthorn finally spoke. "The past has its ways. Justice may be delayed, but it cannot be denied. Tonight, the balance is restored, though not without cost. The police, summoned at dawn, arrived through the still thick fog, guided by my telegram." Dr. Pike was taken calmly, his dignity intact, leaving us with the eerie silence of a storm past but not forgotten. As I prepared to leave Blackthorn Manor, the fog lifting across the moors, I reflected on the fragility of appearances. Beneath polite conversation, old friendships, and genteel manners, envy, fear, and vengeance quietly festered. The manor had exposed the hidden fractures in human nature, a microcosm of life itself, where past misdeeds can echo into the present with devastating force. The moors, now bathed in morning light, seemed serene, but I knew the echoes of that night would linger in the walls, in the memories of those present, and in the whispers carried by the wind. Stories such as these never truly end, they reside in shadowed corners, waiting for the curious, the observant, the unwary. I departed with a sense of weary gratitude. I had not sought to be a detective that night, yet the manor had required it. And in its quiet way, it had reminded me of one immutable truth: secrets, no matter how well concealed, will always find a way to surface.